Hi everyone. So I wanted to try and do a book review. Sometimes there are books that I wonder what people's thoughts are on them, and when they do a whole wrap-up video, you don't know unless you watch the wrap-up videos. But if you're looking for one specific book, it can be annoying to go through those. And so I am going to try and break these up. We'll see how that goes. Don't hold me to it. I may change my mind, but we'll try. So this is something new I'm going to try for 2022, so we'll see how that goes. So let me know if you like this or not. Yeah. So what I'm reviewing today is War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. This edition was translated by Anthony Briggs. So yeah. Penguin Classics. This is the cloth-bound Penguin edition that I've read. This one has 1,358 pages. I actually really enjoyed this. So this is about, this takes place in Russia. Russia is at war with France. The man leading the French in the war is Napoleon. I never quite figured it out with the Russians. It's like Dolgopolov or Denisov, or there's the Tsar. I don't know. I never quite figured that out. It is dense. It's hard because you have French names, you have German names, you have Russian names. I mean, the easiest Russian title or name was like Moscow and Petersburg, because we hear that and say them quite a bit. But I mean, there's Nikolay, that wasn't so bad. Like I said, Denisov wasn't so bad. I don't know. There were some other ones where I just kind of guessed and kind of sputtered my way through it. But so, yeah, so it's war between the Russians and the French. Yeah, so at the start, we're kind of at this ball that they used to hold, because this takes place in the very early 1800s, like 1801 to 1817 or 1800 to 1820. So they're holding this kind of like this ball that they used to back in the day, and it was very thought highly of when people that were a part of the army would go to these as well. And so you do have some of that going on. They're talking about the impending war, and so I mean, there's not much to describe. It's a lot of it is war. You get it, the point of view switches between some different people. You have like Prince Nikolay, and everything with his sister and son and his dad, and that little point of view. And then you have point of views from like Natasha and what she's going through, who she falls in love with, what happens there, if she falls in love with another man, and then eventually a third man down the line, or fourth or fifth, or whatever the case may be. You have cousins falling in love with each other, but remember, this is the early 1800s. And things like that. You were looked more down upon if you were poor, and things like that. So you have the slaves or peasants, and that people owned when they were rich to help take care of their land, and how they were treated and things like that. I really enjoyed this. I gave this 4 stars, which I'm happy. I was very nervous going into it because I know it's dense. I tried to read it before and I DNF'd it. I don't think I was in the right headspace at that time, but I did enjoy that. My favorite perspectives were people that were home, even if the soldiers or the generals were on like a leave from war, and following them. So following life in their home, who they were falling in love with, who are they hoping to marry or court, and the girl's response and things like that. That was my favorite. I didn't enjoy the war aspect. I did enjoy the war aspects. The only part of the war aspects I didn't like is when it became very technical, as far as like, you know, advancing on the French and going from the left and the right and behind and the front, and the tactical maneuvers. That stuff I didn't like. The length didn't bother me. It was just fine. I thought it was very good. Was it too long? I don't think so. Well, maybe like 30 pages too long, because the epilogue in this particular edition is split into two parts. The first part, it does follow the events after the war in a couple of characters' lives. So the last 30 pages of the epilogue is just kind of about power, how someone gains the power, and the transference of the power. Very kind of analytical thinking, and analyzing things like that. So I think that that part of the epilogue, those last 30 pages, didn't add anything to the rest of the book. Definitely did not need to be in there. So that's just my opinion, but I love the rest of the book. As far as like being analytical, as far as the war and war strategy goes, there's just a few pages every now and then. Nothing too, I don't know, too technical, I want to say. Yes, those parts did kind of go over my head because I just wasn't interested in the technicality of the war, but it definitely wasn't unbearable. So I was able to get through that. The rest, again, it's just about life during the war, the life of different colonels and war officers and lower ranking people in the, I forget the term, but like just officers of the war. Little contentions that arose between like one colonel and another colonel or things like that. And so it just followed everyone's kind of little life and their opinion on things and things like that. So definitely a classic, kind of more in like the contemporary setting. But yeah, I don't know. I really liked it, and especially when they would kind of reflect back on life with their family. And you could also see there was one character in here named Petya, and his desire to serve in the war. And he was young. He's like, what, 15 or something in this book, and the parents didn't want him to go. But that's his desire, is to do that. You also deal with loss. I did not get attached to the characters that I cried or was, I mean, yeah, it's like, oh, dang, they died. But nothing that was so, like, as you're reading, earth-shattering that you just bawl, at least for me. But I did think it was very well written. I didn't get too terribly attached to the characters, but that's fine. I still rooted for them on at least some level. So yeah, 1,300 pages, and the simplest explanation is it's about life during a war between the Russians and the French. You do follow some of Napoleon's point of view, but most of the point of views are people that are Russian. So you do kind of get both sides of the war, and as far as what they like, what irritates them, and things like that. So we all know that this is a classic, but think contemporary setting in classic form, or classic and contemporary. So if you absolutely do not like contemporaries, then this is not going to be the book for you. If you like classics, you may like it, because most of the classics are pretty much contemporary, at least the ones that I've read, are the contemporary kind of settings. At least they would be considered temporary if they were released nowadays, or if we were alive when they were released. But I did enjoy this. As far as the gore, there might be a touch of gore every now and then. I mean, hello, it is a war book, but it's really not that bad. Like, I'm reading a different book that's full of war, and it's so much more gory than this. Very little in this. You have people that get injured during the war and they die from their wounds. There's a scene where there's this hospital and it just stinks because of people being in sepsis and infected. how as they get sick and infected, their mind can start to go, and things like that. And it's all just kind of connected, and they're all the point of views, they're all connected. They're just like this thin line or thin thread that connects them all. So they're all related somehow. Not like blood relation, but it's like so-and-so knows so-and-so whose sister is dating so-and-so who is so-and-so's captain or something like that. But yeah, I did thoroughly enjoy this book. I do recommend. I gave this 4 stars. When you're reading that, I do recommend reading the epilogue. I know not everyone likes to, and some people think they have to read it. It can kind of go either way. I generally read the epilogues, and usually it just kind of wraps up the character's life after the events that take place in the majority of the book. So if you want to read the epilogue, I would say just read the first part of the epilogue, the first half. After that, again, it just gets into power and transference of power, and that's it. And there's nothing about any of the characters, really. So, I mean, it does mention Napoleon, but it's just like, how did Napoleon gain his power? How did Napoleon II gain his power? Napoleon III? How about Alexander I? Just kind of things like that. And it just, but that's all it's about. So I would say you don't need to read that part unless you want to. But if you get to that point and you're going, you know what, I'm just done, I want to be done, then be done. You don't need to read that part. But yeah, I thoroughly recommend. The only issue that I had with this particular edition, as you can see, it is, I don't know if you can really see it, but it's broken there, and the pages, as you can see, lift up a bit. So the bind up on this, I don't think this particular edition is the greatest, because it did that, but it could also be it did that because it's such a chunker of a book. So I don't know. I did like this. Again, 4 stars. I mean, you're following, like, okay, some of the women are Anna Pavlovna, Natasha, Princess Maya. You're also following Prince Andre. Yeah, a lot of point of views, but it's not choppy, you know. It just kind of fit together nicely, that it's like you go, oh, okay, now we're following this point of view, but it wasn't so jarring like in some places can be, or in some books can be. But I did think this was very well written, very well put together, well translated. I would, to be able to say that, I mean, it read well. So to me, I'd have to read other translations to see if I prefer another translation, but I am definitely up to reading this in the future again for a reread. Maybe I'll consider reading a different translation to see if opinions change, to see how things are kind of translated differently. Anyway, highly recommend. I gave this 4 stars. Definitely a time commitment because it's so long, but yeah, definitely worth the read. So that's going to be it for this video. So until next time, stay true to yourself and enjoy a good book, and I'll talk to you later.